Quay. Morning, Rev. Uh, it's 8:28 in the morning, West Coast time. It's the 4th of April, Tuesday, May, actually, 2024. If I was a pure Star Wars fan, I'd go crazy over it. I'm not a pure Star Wars fan, so I'm not exactly all that crazy about it. Concerning about what Jesus was going through regarding his anxiety on the cross, death is always an experience to go through once in your life. Two or three times, that's fun. But I would understand his apprehension and anxiety when he was hanging on there because of how many people tried to really show their displeasure of the guy. And how much he really didn't like going through what he. I think he came down to earth with an innate knowledge that, yes, he was going to be sacrificed, but it was going to be God's call on which particular day and time it was going to be. But I think he was apprehensive about it in mortal form because in mortal form, you're somewhat cut off from the spiritual realm to a point. And you can deliver the messages left and right to the people, but being recalled back upstairs, the process is not exactly the most pleasant. Especially when people are fearful, angry, and feeling like their whole world is going to be taken apart, so might as well take apart Jesus' world. I mean, after all, if you were Jesus, you did insult the Pharisees. How dare you? You insulted the Roman Empire. How dare you do that? Let alone you ticked off a lot of people down there. But he also helped a lot of people in his lifetime, didn't he? And those people were silent because they were the silent minority, the witnesses regarding the injustice that was about to happen. Or, excuse me, forgive me. Mornings are difficult to wake up to, especially when dealing with junk in it. So, if I'm not mistaken on this one, they really didn't want a troublemaker because the Roman Empire, at least out in the Middle East, they really didn't want any issues happening. They didn't want any issues happening and filtering through Rome because they feared Rome's judgment, including from the praetor at the time. If I think of it that way. Excuse me one second. Yeah, I know. I gotta see the docs on these things. Give me one second, please. Okay. So if I was going to be hanging on the cross, whipped, beaten, urinated on, insulted, stuff tossed at me, everybody trying to show their foul thing because they think they're so loyal to the empire, either doing it out of fear or mocking him because it was fun to do. Let's go mock. Let's go mocking about. I mean, why should this guy be any different? You got these two other scuzzy looking dudes up here. Why should we care about any of them? What do they matter to us? We're the us, don't you understand? We're the we, and you're just you. Who the hell you think you are? You're doing all these fancy things. I don't believe any one of you, and I don't believe any of your stories of it. I'm hearing it from my neighbors over here. I'm hearing it from my neighbors over here. Who the heck you think you are dealing with here? Convoke in the name of God. Well, God's more important than this twerp. Who the heck is this twerp here? Hell of a way to put it into a dramatic fashion, isn't it? Of course, you want more dramatic fashions. Look at the movies back in the 50s and 60s. Oh, yeah. I just grew up in the classics, I tell you. Everyone else trying to show how much this would be or favor of. I don't know. All I can tell you is watching this stuff going on in the theatrics is one thing, but in person, you know what scares the living daylights out of me? In our time, we may be coming back to that, a slow circle to that kind of behavior and torment. And no wonder Christ was feeling the anxiety, because it seemed like during that time people had lost their humanity. Piety was forsaken. I suppose here's a time when you're going through the process that you're all alone. You're cut off from anything and everybody. Your senses are going out. And the last sense would be the internal one, a connection to the divine. Because in this process, the soul has to disconnect from everything mortal. The eyesights go, the feeling, sensation goes, smell goes. Probably left at the mouth and a little bit of hearing left. Your brain's shutting down, and the body's trying to adjust. The brain's working very hard trying to do self-preservation, but at this point, there's blood loss, there's shock happening at this point because you've been stabbed, you've been whipped, you're losing blood everywhere. And the body suffered so much traumatic injury that one can barely deal with it, deal with the pain. But you get into that critical point where you're slipping and you feel like you are slipping. And you feel like there's nothing there to hold on to you and catch you because you feel like you're going to fall. You're going to fall right out of your body. That's a hell of an experience to go through. Some people actually float out, but or just rise up. In his situation, he'd be falling flat on his face if he was a spirit. But the disconnection, and then there's reorientation as soon as the spirit leaves the body. It takes a quick time, but time's immaterial because time is of the human mortal realm that we live in. But the spiritual is different. Once you get out of it, you're your own person without the senses necessary. And I suppose it could have been argued back then that Christ looked like he died and maybe put into a state of shock for 3 days and came back to life, but healed with scars. That's a miraculous healing, I'll tell you that much. But the process itself is scary enough, especially when everything else peels away and you're left with your own inner self. And then what do you do? Well, if Christ was going into the light during that time, he should have got reoriented into the heavenly realm and feeling connected. That's the hardest part about being spirit when you leave the body is being disconnected. Because it's disoriented. And I'm not talking about how Hollywood views it. I'm talking about personal, dude. When you're looking around and you don't know what the hell's going on and you see things that normally you wouldn't. I mean, I was inclined to go up. So I floated. And the infamous tunnel. And there was somebody in it. I kept saying it wasn't your time, John. Go back. It's not your time. I wanted to go home because I was drawn to comfort, love, light. Light. I was safety. It was safety. It was security. It was so much pure love. You couldn't even understand it. The spirit would sing, but my spirit was not singing. I wake up 3 times in a mortal body, back in some kind of dreamlike state, until I wake up in the emergency, until I wake up in the recovery hall. Stretch of beds. I see Ma's face. I remember the story she told me, but sometimes I'd get a glimpse of what I went through as a kid. I couldn't remember it a long time ago. I really couldn't. I heard the story Ma told me a few dozen times throughout my lifetime, and I know the mind can try to pull up other images, manufactured if necessary for imaginings. But the thing is, you don't really discard that feeling. You don't. It's stored. And it's scary. It's terrifying. It means something, and you can't figure out what. The missing portion, the longing, and the wanting. You wanted to be connected. And one way it was. But the hardest thing to hear is it wasn't my time. I guess there was a lot of anger and a lot of resentment in that one. I guess there was a lot of anger and resentment for me living all this time without me realizing this. I mean, a few times in my youth I got connected to it. Well, what after? What I had gone through 4 years old, 1970, was an open heart surgery trying to correct 3 mitral valves leaking in my heart. One got patched, the other one got sewed, and the other one they kept leaking because I kept dying in them too many times. But you don't forget. Your spirit does not forget. The brain will. If it's too much information overload, it will not much. At least my usable brain didn't. I mean, it just didn't want to comprehend it, but my spirit did. My spirit knew it. It should have been peace, but I was connected to fear and a hell of a lot of anxiety and anger and confusion and confliction. And it's been a rare time as a kid feeling it a couple of times after the heart surgery that I was able to just get connected for an instant. But even that, I remember, I have the memories of it. I wish I had kept that feeling though. That would have been substantial. But I know it. I know it. But there's been a lot of times I think I would have been terrified. I would have been terrified. And if I was one of those guys hanging up right next to Jesus, not knowing what the afterlife was like, losing my life, wanted to cling on, wanted to hold on to the mortal corpse as much as possible. Just this was it. This was life. You don't discard it. You live as long as you can, and then after that, you're dead. You're gone. You're history. And Christ, I think it was worse because of the mission he was sent on. But he was not prepared for the departure. He was not. He was not prepared for the fanfare of his departure. I guess in a way, if you want to look at it, was hang on one second. Hang on one second. Now, this is what happens when you get. I'm not a smoker. I'm not a smoker. I just wake up to more hacking and stuff in the lungs. I'm surviving. I don't think I've got pneumonia. Thank God. Been through it. Not fun. Really not fun. I was saying something about the fanfare. I was thinking about a bon voyage crowd at the docks saying bye, but it's like bye, come back, don't come back, and don't bring anybody else. You insulted the living crap out of us. Have a nice day. Get the hell out of here, you schmuck. If I want to look at it that way, but I know there's other people in where the cross was hanging around, and what they couldn't show in the crowds. That fanfare was only when Christ was being led towards the hill. But afterwards, the hardest thing is to do is to lose a relative or someone special in your life because you feel your heart's been torn apart. And maybe in an instant, Christ would understand and feel that for everybody, that just in an instant, he would connect with us because he felt his heart was being ripped out. He felt the pain, he felt the loss, he felt the agony of what humanity felt. I mean, we assumed that when Jesus was coming down to earth as a human being, as a spiritual, enlightened being, and about to give us good news. But to go through the process, you talk about very humbling, humiliating, and terrifying at the same time. My experience was just trying to be put under on an operating table and then waking up, leaving my damn body. I mean, you talk about being flummoxed at this point. And yeah, I was flummoxed. I didn't understand what was going on with me. I really did not. This was terrifying. This was absolutely terrifying for me. But Jesus had been spat upon, insulted, even worse than what I had been through. And it's no wonder he didn't feel the connection, because I guess he was equating more and more to the fear, to the disconnection. I guess he tuned into the fear at that point of being afraid of, like it was all for nothing. So in that moment, I would relate not to a Bible verse, but to an actual cry of anguish. It's like, God, you're with me all this time, and now I don't feel you. What's going on? In my own interpretation here, Rev, the process. It's terrifying to hear it. It's terrifying even to see it. It's no wonder that one time I had seen my mother being afraid of death. Special help to get through it. Have relatives and an aunt through it. When she was dying a long time ago, she was talking to relatives. I guess in that process, she had to be readied for the transition. Because I'll tell you one thing, it's not an easy thing to go through. I'll tell you that much. Especially when you don't have anybody to transition with you, to talk with you, to explain the process on their side of how what the body is going through as the spirit's trying to leave. So imagine having your family with you to give you that comfort. And Jesus, I guess, was put into a situation where he was feeling none of that. He wasn't feeling like he needed an angel to walk him through this. We had the assumption that he is the Son of God and therefore he should have been connected to God all the time. My understanding in this situation is, what if he wasn't? What if God had wanted his Son to feel what the humans have gone through? A great deal. What if God had intended for Jesus to experience the stuff we had to go through? I mean, he's put him through everything else, almost. A lot of things in human experience I hadn't done any, but still. And I probably regret it. But what gets to me is the loneliness and isolation. And how do you deal with that? It's separating yourself from an energy source that you've been depending upon, drawing upon, getting strength and courage, and withdrawn for a time because now you need to know how the humans are feeling as they're going through the process. I guess in this way, my God chose Jesus. I don't know. I mean, it could have been other people he could have done it through. Took him this long. I never could quite figure that part out. Maybe if I happen to get back up in heaven, I'll be able to ask him it out. No, not that one. Why did it take so long for you to understand this? You created it, but now you didn't understand what you were creating. Are you Dr. Frankenstein and we're the monsters? Or is it the opposite? Or the monsters that invented Dr. Frankenstein for our creation? And that a kick in the head. But no, I think Jesus needs to experience it to understand what humanity was going through. And maybe to help us as humans to go through the same. The fear, the terror, the loneliness, isolation, and then the disconnection until, and maybe in that process, the body was there, but the spirit already left the body for a while. Now, in medical science, as we understand it, and this usually drives the scientists crazy, not to mention the medical establishment. How does a mind last without the influence in it? If you're under a life support, if you're constantly under a mechanical life support, basically you can keep a brain alive. You can keep the heart going and the organs as long as you've got life support going. But there has to be a driving force in the body and not just a chemical reaction. It has to be the energy in there. It has to be the life. Because without that, all you're doing is just pumping blood into a brain that's not giving out signals to anything else. Not to the organs that need working on. I mean, this is what science and medical, uh, this is what they've been telling us all this long. So I don't get it. I don't get it. But what I can understand is what he went through. Not being tortured and bloodied and beaten to death, but the isolation, the disconnection. But coming back into the body, that re-entry's a bitch. I don't even remember that one. I barely remember that one. The body and the brain are remembering the sensations, the feelings, the disconnections, and sometimes it feels like it's icy cold. In the mortal realm, we don't feel the heat. We don't feel the energy. Once we leave the body, I mean, that's it. We're disconnected. So in trying to comprehend and trying to explain that energy state in a way that we can explain it to anybody else, good luck on that one. But why did God forsaken him? No. He wasn't forsaken. He was going through the process. He was going through the process of disconnection, disassociation. And yes, it was terrifying because, yeah, it's never a fun thing to go through. I'm not quite sure. Was it Raphael or was it Michelangelo or was it one of the big guys from upstairs. I think it was Raph, who was hanging out with my mother the last day, last moments, getting her ready. My brother and I, when we were in the room trying to get her going, my brother was feeling this cold chill in the air. I was wondering how come the damn room was so cold most of the times, last days of her life. I didn't realize the family was hanging about just trying to keep her calm. Actually made her lucid. Before she passed, she was experiencing some dementia. She couldn't recognize me. She barely recognized my brother. But she recognized him more than me. On some occasions, it scared and pissed me off. I didn't realize it. I should have. It still pissed me off that she couldn't recognize me, her youngest, her baby. I'm her baby. Still. But I didn't recognize, and I didn't understand. I should have figured it out, but I didn't. Although I read something about those kind of stories about angelic visitors. But the physical manifestations, sucking out the air, sucking out the energy. I heard stories about ghosts um, when they're around people and places. Sometimes you feel this weird cold chill, and you're not quite sure where it's coming from. Sometimes you just blithely ignore it because it's cold chill. It's coming from somewhere, so who cares? There may not be somebody hanging around watching over you or trying to interact with you one way or another, or trying to explain things that may or may not happen. You get an instinct, you get the feel, you get to know about it. That's an internal instinct. It's not recognized by the brain. The brain doesn't recognize it. It goes on a different level than I said six senses, right? But sometimes there's a seventh sense, and sometimes I couldn't figure it out so much. But there is that sense. The soul is identifying and figuring, relating with it, or being pissed off about it. Was Jesus? There may have been more to it than what our mere mortal status can figure out, unless you've been through the damn process. There's. I lack the words, the descriptions. I lack them because there's not enough adequate descriptive words to use, to utilize. Anyway, I thought I might try to get a little bit of analysis of what's going on this morning. So I'll send this through the regular route, except I'll probably send this one through the comments. It'll be easier. I've discovered that trying to send stuff to you through the email, and also not to mention to your own webpage, you don't get the messages as much. So I'm hoping maybe this will get to you. I gotta get it processed. I'll talk at you later, Rev.